Empty Tomb, written by Rudo Muzondo. Copyright 2021, all rights reserved. Chapter 1. The Wrath of Death. Clearing his throat, Genie snugged up the cozy white, pure cashmere bedthrow up to his chin. It graced his body, contrasting perfectly with his dark matte skin. Afternoon naps were his routine from Friday to Sunday. He was a party animal. He loved being out there in clubs and public places, sipping expensive champagnes, showing off his flamboyant lifestyle. He loathed being alone. Something inside his mind wouldn't let him have the luxury of human necessary solitude. He owned a nightclub as one of his businesses to make money while catering for his nightlife. An hour into his nap, a persistent buzz under his pillow, he furtively moved his hand upwards and reached for his cell phone. He didn't want to completely shut the world out, as he couldn't live without it. He decided to put his cell phone on low buzzing mode instead of switching it off during his scheduled 4-hour nap. 4 was his favorite number. Most of the things he did or owned, he did in 4. He owned 4 mega businesses, he had 4 mansions in 4 counties, he owned 4 sports cars, 4 close friends, 4 girlfriends, and 4 personalities, though only one was distinct. Many people didn't understand how he managed to achieve all of that. They called it different names. Most believed that he was a high-level Satanist who sold his soul for wealth. Some believed that he was a streetwise white-collar thief who benefited from corrupt government associates. A few believed that he was a hard-working, gifted hustler who was destined to succeed. In the middle of his nap, Genie woke up hysterically, panting in cold sweat, gulping hard for air. He sat on the edge of the bed, wiping the remainders of his sleep off his eyes, trying to decipher the meaning of the horrid, vivid dream. In the dream, he was surrounded by fire, horrifying screams, coffins, and he saw himself in one of the coffins. A sudden pensive air of melancholy filled his bedroom and gripped his consciousness. His heart pounded faster, his insides cuddled. "Damn it," he whispered. He locked eyes with the pure cashmere bedthrow, and it pitifully whispered, "Don't go, Genie, stay with me tonight." His sixth sense somehow alerted him to say a little prayer, but he purposely dismissed the dream as if it was nothing. No one and nothing could ever stop or convince Genie from skipping a party. Dressed up for the people, he captured a few pictures and posted on Instagram. His friends ready and waiting, he had a hard time deciding which car to drive, and finally he put his trust on the Rolls-Royce Wraith. He loved the sense of security it gave him because of its world-class safety features. The crowd arrived in dozens, and a sweet melody drifted through the busy atmosphere, creating an unforgettable ambience. Genie was always the last to arrive for attention. He craved attention like a stubborn, diminutive demon. People cheered for him and took videos as he parked his Rolls-Royce Wraith. His entourage that had been on standby waiting for his arrival escorted him in style and weaved him through the crowds, bumping into champagne-bearing waiters. The crowd roared at his presence as the music thrummed through their souls, possessing every inch of their beings. He felt like he was some sort of god as he waved majestically at the crowds. Bottom-shelf cheap brand women positioned themselves like low-hanging fruits and made sure to be noticed by the god of den of iniquity. The club was alive, breathing like a thirsty ancient dragon. Just like its name dreams, it captured every dream and destiny in its proximity. The air was so thick with lights and smoke, obliterating every sense of reason and discernment. People could have been underwater without noticing it. The vibe was ecstatically mystical. It rendered the crowd in a self-transcendent state. Bumping, grinding, twerking, fondling, sipping and puffing was the order of the night till the birth of dawn. Inflicted by the spirit of immorality, men and women, married and unmarried, who came alone, left the den of iniquity in pairs to satisfy their desires, birthed by you all know who. Jezebel. For an after-party, Genie left with 3 people: his friend, a video vixen whom he had been frivolously acquainting, and her friend, to square up the ledger. He had promised the video vixen flamboyant gifts and money for her birthday, and for the love of material things, love of money, clout chasing, and association, she didn't think twice. Intoxicated by champagne, he went behind the wheel and they didn't question. They were equally intoxicated to reason. Without a seatbelt on, he drove his Rolls-Royce Wraith at high speed, wraithfully like an immortal savage beast that had many lives and didn't care about losing one. They didn't stop him. Instead, they cheered him up, praised him, and giggled all the way euphorically. trying to overtake two cars in front of him. It was too late, and in a split second, he found himself head-on with another car, and as he tried to swerve, he lost grip and hit a tree. Everything happened in slow motion, and immediately the alcohol vanished from his system. That moment was the most conscious, the most fearful, the most regretful, and most alive he had ever been his whole life. The car interior suddenly changed into an archaic, ghostly antique look, as airless as a tomb. Everything was so illusory and ethereal. Screams behind him in the back seat. He couldn't move either talk. The atmosphere was charged with a peculiar melancholy that he had never experienced before. Sober, terrified, somber, lethargic, and confused, he gulped hard for air. One tear broke free from the prison of his eye, lost its way into his mouth, and he tasted the saltiness of his own fate. Suddenly a loud thought blazed his mind, and he remembered his cashmere bed throw whispers, "Don't go, Jeannie, stay with me tonight." Regretfully, another tear escaped from the inner carvings of his other eye and solemnly paraded down his cheeks, concealing his loudest screams. Immediately he remembered the horrid dream he had when he took his afternoon nap. It wasn't just a dream, it was a warning and a vision. "We are leaving in a moment," his weeping soul whispered. He couldn't feel his body. Death was inevitable. He knew it was the end of one world and the beginning of the other. What terrified him beyond comprehension was the unknown ahead of him. In that state, he heard voices of strangers, and within seconds they were trying to rescue his friends who were still alive, stuck in the car, but they failed at many attempts. They only managed to pull Jeannie out of the car, and just after they put him on the ground, his distraught best friend who was driving behind arrived and kneeled next to him, calling his name in confusion, shock, disbelief, and deep hurt. Upon hearing his voice, Jeannie turned his head, locked eyes with his best friend, and they were both confronted with great fear. Jeannie had so much to say to his best friend, so many questions, messages, and instructions to give, but his voice was trapped inside of his body. He couldn't say a thing. In that same instant, he realized that his car was in flames. The horrific screams of his friends who were still stuck in the car ripped his heart into pieces, rendered his body arctic cold, and paralyzed his soul. Overwhelmed by great anguish and helplessness, his soul screamed in dire need of a magical heroine to rescue his friends. There was a deep gut-wrenching cry in his heart and a deep-rooted yearning for another chance in his spirit. The realms of the spirit beckoned at him, fate sealed. His soul wept. It couldn't be quelled. At that same moment he heard an eerie voice, "It is time to go." He managed to twitch his eyelids a little, and right next to his best friend was a skinny, pale-looking figure dressed in a black-robed psychopomp. Only he could see it. In a haunting voice, "My name is Death Angel," the pale, gaunt, cadaverous figure introduced itself proudly. In an attempt to grasp at straws, Jeannie desperately looked at his best friend for some saving, but it was too late. He breathed his last.